Lesson 882, From Squares to Roots, Side Lengths and Areas. In this lesson, you'll understand that the square root of a, or with the symbol as square root of a, means the side length of a square whose area is a square units. You'll also use square root notation to represent the side length of a square given its area. All right, you're in your notebook on page 168. Let's just make note of our two learning goals. The first is to explain the meaning of square roots. Explain the meaning of square roots. In terms of a square's side length. Explain the meaning of square roots in terms of a square's side length. And the other thing is to write the side length of a square using a square root symbol. It actually takes a little bit of getting used to using this square root symbol. It's easy enough to draw. It looks like that. And in the activity on Desmos today, there was an abbreviation that you could type in that would create that. So if you're in Desmos and wondering how to make that symbol, you can easily either use the keyboard or just type in these letters and this will pop up. Okay, so it seems like this lesson should be really straightforward, but the first time you start using square root symbols to express the side length of a square, it can be a little confusing. So if you're feeling like it should be easy and it's not, you're in good company. Sometimes when we want to know the side length of a square, whose length is not countable using a grid, when that's true, we can take the square root of the area in order to find the side length. The square root of the area is the same as the side length. Let me see if I can show you what I mean. I think it might be a little more clear than what we're about to talk about here. We have some pretty squares. If the area of the square is 16, I know there's an integer that I can multiply by itself to get 16. 4 times 4 gives me the area of 16. Or if it's a nice number like 25, there's a number that I can multiply by itself to get that area. It's 5. 5 times 5 is 25. But what if I have an area that's somewhere between 16 and 25? How do I express the length of that side? Well, the way we express the length of that side is using this square root symbol. If the area is 20, I know the length of this side is somewhere between 4 and 5, but it's hard to pin it down. So we're going to just use this symbol and say, well, the side length is the square root of 20. We'll talk more about square roots in lessons to come, but for right now, that's the connection we're making today. If the area is 20, the length of one side is the square root of 20. Let's look at the example I have in the notes. Here, we're saying that square B has an area of 17 square units. We say the side length, this distance here, that side length of a square with an area of 17 square units is the square root of 17. Now, there's no calculation there. That's just a way of expressing the length of this side, the square root of the area. So what that means is that if I take the square root of 17, the length of one side, and multiply it by the square root of 17, because squares have all the same sides, draw it over here, multiplying those two sides together should give me this area, 17. This is an area, that's the side length, or an expression for the side length. Let's take a look at a few squares and just get used to that notation. So we're asked to find each missing value. For square D, I'm missing a value. For square E, I'm missing a value. And for square F, I'm going to have a lot of work. Let's start with square D. In this square, we're told the area of the square is 25. So the side length, I know you're probably thinking, I can tell you the side length, Mrs. Tuitt. I know what I can multiply by itself to get 25. But if we didn't, we could express it like this. The side length is the square root of 25. Now, you're right, that's just another way of saying 5. But it's not always that easy. It's not always that easy to tell what number you can multiply by itself to get 25. So that's how we look in square D. Let's take a look at square E. Well, this time we're given the side length. The side length of this square in units is the square root of 29. Well, if the side length is the square root of 29, then that must mean that the area is 29 square units. Square root of 29 times the square root of 29 is 29. And finally, for F, oh shoot, we're not given either one of these things, but I bet if we found one of these values, we could find the other. And in our last lesson, we found how to find the area of a square that was tilted, so let's go ahead and use that knowledge. I'm going to use that, oops, let me get my other pen. I'm going to use that deconstruct and reassemble and break this middle of the square up into a bunch of triangles, like a pinwheel shape. And I can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 square units right there. But I still need to find the area of one of these triangles. If I find the area of one of these triangles, all 4 of them are congruent, so I'll be home free. Well, I see that the height here is 3. The base here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the area of this triangle is 1/2. The base, I'll call that 5, times the height, that's 3. And I can multiply these in any order I want. I'm going to do 5 times 3 is 15. Half of that is 7.5. So that's one triangle. And I've got 4 of them. So if I multiply that area by 4, that gives me the 4 triangles. And I still need to add in this square in the middle that I can see and count as just 4 units. So 4 times 7.5 is 30. So the area of the whole square is 34. All right, well, that gets me partway there. And let's remember, if the area is 34, then the side length of that square is the square root of 34. So the meaning of this equation using squares and side lengths, this just means that a square with an area of 9 has a side length of the square root of 9. I'm going to write that out. A square with an area of 9 has a side length, oops, shouldn't have capitalized that, side length of the square root of 9. And that makes sense because, well, the square root of 9 is just 3, and 3 times 3 is 9. So in these last 2 lessons, we've looked at area and how to find that in a tilted square. And we're being introduced to this square root symbol today as a way to express the length of one side of a square with that area. Good luck in the practice work tonight.